Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. My guest today is a woman who's going to tell us the story about how she lost her husband to suicide when she was young, of course, and had two young daughters as well. So, guest, if you would please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your husband and kind of what everything was like prior to his death in 2009.
So, do you want me to give my name? I
You
mean, I
can,
don't mind.
absolutely, if you want to.
Okay, my name is Francie Mooney, and my husband died by suicide in 2009. We had two girls. We have two girls. We have. They were 9 and 17 at the time. Before he passed, he started having a lot of really odd episodes that he had never had before, and I knew for a long time that there was a lot of mental health issues on his side of the family. It ran rampant on his side of the family. His dad, all of his brothers and sisters. He's the oldest of 6 kids. We met. I'll start at the beginning. We met in 1989. I knew the minute I saw him that I was going to marry him, and 3 months later we were married. And my kids still to this day ask me, how did you know? How did you know he was the one? And I'm like, you just know. I can't explain it, but you just know. So he was my person. And it was really hard. So I'm going to cry early.
That's okay. That's okay.
It'll
So
be fun.
How long were you married for? You had a 17 and a 9-year-old.
We were married when he passed. We were just about to hit our 20-year anniversary. So if he was still alive, our anniversary, September 5th, we would have been married 34 years this year.
Yeah. Wow.
This is the first year that I didn't remember our anniversary. I
Wow.
was like, oh my God, I didn't realize our anniversary passed by.
Yeah.
But I think I'm finally getting to that point where it's not it's an important date, but I don't have to post about it on Facebook or anything like that.
It's not as fresh. But as you know, grief is very personal. So, people who, I don't need to post about it, or I do need to post about it, or I want to post about it, whatever, on social media. So it's like, I feel better posting about my son on his death anniversary and so on, but I don't really post a lot about my first husband who died by suicide. So it's not that I'm over it. It's just it isn't something I don't need it, I guess is what I want to say.
Exactly. I do his birth. I acknowledge him on his birthday. Girls and I talk about him a lot when we're together, like on holidays and stuff. But the hardest part is when my sister-in-law would come from New York and visit us, especially the first 5 years. We were so much further in our grief process than she was, and we lived it every day. I mean, she didn't seem to understand that we lived with the loss every day. She also did, but it was different. Yeah. And she was so far behind because she didn't go to counseling. She went to a grief group for survivors of suicide, but she was that person that just wanted to tell her story instead of listening. And the first thing they tell you when you go to those groups is, do not say, oh, by the way, yeah, I get it. This is what happened to me, or I understand how you feel, or blah, 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 because you don't. Everybody's grief is different, and, everybody handles things differently. So she was always, when she would come, wanting to celebrate Terry for Father's Day, or celebrate him for this, or we need to go out to dinner for his birthday, or blah, blah, blah. Well, the girls and I had it's not like a tradition, but we had our ways of celebrating him that did not include the family. Right. So it was really hard for the girls, especially, like I said, the first 5 years when she would come and visit. It was like so emotionally hard when she left, it was like we could breathe again. Yeah. Now it's been 14 years and she has grown a lot. And she still says I amaze her because of everything I went through. And I'm like, it was just me doing my job. Yep. Sorry.
I'm sure you've had this too. And then when people say, oh, I don't know how you've dealt with this or how you've dealt with it, my thought in my head is always, well, what exactly was the option, right? I mean, there
Exactly.
was nothing, especially when you've got kids to take care of, young kids to take care of at that, right? So, the story with the sister-in-law makes me think, you were almost in a space where you were responsible for helping her with her grief, when really it's like, well, I
Exactly.
don't want to be there. That's not me. I'm also, grieving this event, the loss of this very important person in my life, and I get that. I also think, and I'm gonna ask you if you agree with me, that when the death happens by suicide, it's a whole lot different, a lot of different type of grief than if it was by another way, so cancer, accident, and so on. And there's that survivor's guilt that hangs back on us, right? Where it's like, okay,
Oh
how
yeah.
how did I not see this coming? How did I not, whatever, all those questions that I think a lot of us have beaten ourselves up with over the years that are so dreadfully unfair. So tell me about like your girls. So 17 and 9, such precious, impressionable as well, young ages, and girls to that end with losing dad. How did you help them through that process while still taking care of yourself and being able to function and go grocery shopping and all the things that we have to do, right,
Yes.
while we're dealing with something so big. I mean,
Yeah, well, first of all, it was his first day back to work after being off work for 3 weeks due to something that had happened at work, and he was mentally not doing very well. And the 4th of July is what started it. I ended up taking him to the hospital that day, but at that point, we weren't even talking to each other. We're living in the same house and not talking to each other. He would only listen to his sister. So I called his sister and said, please tell him he needs to shower and get ready because I'm taking him to the hospital. Normally, he would have taken our youngest to the parade in Everett for the 4th of July, which was, they always went together. And he couldn't do it. He was pacing, he was talking to himself, just very odd behavior. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I mean, it had been coming for a while, the changes in behavior, the weight loss, just not, he switched positions at the job that he was at to something that he had no experience with, and it just like, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you have no mechanical experience. You don't even know how to change the oil in a car or do anything to your car. I have to take care of all that stuff. What are you doing? So it just, the doctor that he was seeing had signed paperwork to allow him to return to work. And when I went to the doctor with him, because I was going to all of his appointments before everything happened, the doctor would not listen to me as his wife or as a medical assistant. They're like, well, you're not a doctor. I'm like, I'm a certified medical assistant. No, I'm not a nurse or a doctor, but I'm also his wife, and I'm the one living with him and seeing the changes. I don't want him to go back to work until he can see a psychiatrist. And I've been trying to find one. And at that point in time, in 2009, there was nobody available in Everett or anywhere. So I was able to find one that would take him on Monday morning at like 9 a.m. And he ended up dying on Sunday because the doctor let him go back to work because he promised not to hurt himself. I was so angry about that. And in the time between July 4th and the day that he died, he had been in a psychiatric. We ended up on the 4th of July in the psychiatric ward in Kirkland or Bellevue, the hospital out there. I can't remember the name of it, but within 24 hours, the psychiatrist was saying he could leave, or the doctor was saying he could leave. And I'm like, no, I don't agree with that. I've seen what's happening. I want him to stay longer. I also know that people that are like this will say what they think the doctor wants to hear, and that's what he's doing.
yeah.
He knows how to sweet talk his way around
You would
things.
think, though, that the healthcare professionals that do that for a living, that would be, that's their expertise, that they would recognize that and be able to
Yeah,
do it.
you would think. Yeah.
I've heard so many stories of people that the same thing happened, where they were convinced that this person's going to be okay, they're going to be fine, and then they let them go, and then they aren't fine, and that's how you
Yeah.
find.
So luckily, the doctor that was doing his appointment that day when I came in to meet with them agreed with me that he needed to stay longer, but he was adamant that he needed to leave, that he could not be there. And so she talked to us about a program that he could go to that was an outpatient program, learning how to deal with the thoughts in your head and how to fight the negativity and whatever else that they needed to do. And it was for a whole week that he would go. So he agreed to do that. She wouldn't let him go unless he agreed to do it, which I was thankful for. And I wish that he wouldn't have agreed so that she would have stayed. But I took him the first couple days to it. And then he drove himself and drove home the last 3 days. And I've still got some of the notes that he wrote while he was in those classes about me and about his parents and stuff like that. And nothing bad. It was just him getting his thoughts out from learning in the class. But I don't think it helped. I think what it did was for those 3 weeks, it made him more open to talking about suicide with me because he knew I would get it. And so he did not say anything around the girls at that point. And he would talk to me about suicide. And I found out the day that I took him to the hospital on the 4th of July that he had attempted at least 3 times at our house in the garage with a rope to hang himself, and a couple times at work going out on top of a large building to see if he could jump. And that scared the holy hell out of me. So,
wow.
The day that he did pass, he did end up falling from a building, and I was contacted by his work, and they wouldn't talk to me over the phone. I thought it was him calling me to check in during his lunch break, because he would do that when he was at work, because they work 12-hour shifts, and he'd call and say, hey, how's it going? What are you guys doing? Blah, blah, blah. And we'd just chat for a few minutes while he was on lunch, and then he would go back to work for the rest of the shift. So I answered the phone. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And it was somebody from HR. And I was like, oh, and I'm like, is something wrong with Terry? Is he okay? And they said, we need to come to your house and talk to you. Of course, everybody knew where I lived because I was very active in the community, president of the North County, the Everett Soccer Board. I was on the North County thing. I did PTA, blah, 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 so they were at our house literally like 5 minutes later. I wouldn't let them come in the house because the girls were there. And I went out on the porch, and they looked at me, and I said, oh my God, he completed suicide, didn't he? And they just looked at me like, what? I mean, it just came out of my mouth. I wasn't even thinking, it just came out. And I was like, oh, okay, where is he? What do I do? And they said he didn't make it. And I couldn't go to the scene, which was good, because I didn't even feel like that. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I get you.
But then later on, when they were there, literally, my uncle worked at the same company for over 30 years. And one of the first things that the HR lady did after she talked to me was contacted my uncle, because all of a sudden my uncle and my aunt showed up, and I was like, what are you guys doing here? And then the next thing I know, there's people from the community showing up at my house.
Yeah, they wanted to offer you support, and I know, as I know you know too, that when these events happen, those of us on the outside, we don't know what to do. We don't have any idea what to do. There's nothing you can say. There's no way I can make it better. So I know a lot of people, come over and talk, or bring me some food, or whatever that might be. And I think that shows what an important member of the community you are, that so many people wanted to come by and see what they could do to help you. So yeah, so you had to tell your kids.
Oh God,
yeah,
that was horrible.
Yeah,
and I tried to keep as much as I could from the youngest one, because she and Terry were so close.
Yeah.
My oldest daughter, I could slap her for this to this day, is she heard what was being said and how he did it. And the first thing she did was call her cousin and tell her, my dad just, jumped off of a building and killed himself, and blah, 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 blah. And I looked at her, and I was like, literally within 30 minutes of us being told. And I was like, don't call people and tell them that stuff. What are you doing? And at that point, she and Terry had not had the best relationship, because when she was in third grade, she had her own opinion and he couldn't handle it, that it was different than his. So for her teenage years were really rough between the two of them because he didn't get it. And I don't think that he didn't like that she was so much like me as far as saying what she thought and voicing her opinions and not being afraid to voice her opinions. But it really bothered him that she didn't have the same opinions as him anymore. And so they had a really tough time her teenage years. And before he passed, like the week or so before he passed, in those 3 weeks where he was talking to me about suicide, and in between the time that he had died, he talked to her a lot and apologized for how he had been behaving the past couple of years and all the things that had been going on. And I think he needed to get that off of his chest before he actually did do something. Because one of the first things she asked is like, is there a note? Did he leave a note? Like, no.
Yeah.
No. So
Yeah.
she was mad about that. She was
Yeah.
really mad that he didn't leave some kind of a note saying why or bye or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, kid. That's not how it works. That's
Yeah.
in the movies. Yes,
Yeah.
some people do write things, but I think most people do not. Having looked at suicide as much as I have since that time, most people do not leave a note. So I'm sorry, but that didn't happen.
And I'll tell you, I did get a note, and I'll tell you that the note made no sense. So you don't
Exactly.
get, yeah, because the person's mind is not, they're not thinking rationally when they're
It
at that
wasn't it
spot.
wasn't him anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. So the stuff they might write might be like, I don't even know what does this have to do with anything, but not you don't get, I don't know, like you said, maybe in the movies you get an explanation, but and even then, what explanation is going to be acceptable and say, oh, okay, well now I understand, right? That's never going to happen. So I mean, if it's any solace to you at all, I did get a note, and it didn't help.
I'm
Didn't
not
help.
surprised because I really think that at that moment he was not. I mean, when he told me he was hearing voices the first time that he told me that,
Mhm.
he backtracked really quickly and said, "Oh, but it's my voice telling me what I should or shouldn't do." And I'm like, I don't believe you because his youngest brother, who's a year older than me, had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and had an episode and was in the hospital for about 6 weeks while they tried to figure out medications for him.
Yeah.
And when he came out for the funeral with my sister-in-law, um, he made a point of telling me that it was my fault that Terry committed suicide. And I told him what he could do with himself
Yeah.
and said, first of all, it was his choice and his decision to do this. I tried as much everything I could in my power
Yeah.
to stop it. And people would not listen, which is the biggest thing that gets me still to this day is the people not listening to those that are closest to that person and seeing the signs and still not listening. But he just had another episode and had to be put into the hospital again for a couple weeks. And when he came out of it and was lucid again, he told my sister-in-law that he finally realized that he's never dealt with Terry's death and the way he acted to me and to the girls all these years, because we've never spoken to him since the funeral. When he went back to New York, we never heard from him again. That he was really sorry for how he treated us and that he should have never done that, but he couldn't deal with Terry's death because he and Terry were very close, as well as Terry and his sister being very close. And so I know it's been really hard on them, but it's a different kind of hard versus what the girls and I have been through. And I get that. And I'm not discounting their grief in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
It's just that I know how I dealt with it and how I helped my girls deal with it, that neither one of them took those steps. And I mean, you can't force people to do what you think is best for them.
Right.
It is what it is. So we'll see if he contacts me or the girls at this point. I'm not looking for anything. I don't need an apology at this point. It's water under the bridge, and I know what I did and did not do. I don't need his forgiveness or anything. I don't care.
Yeah.
He burned those bridges when he said that to me. And if he wants a relationship with the girls, they're both open to it. I've talked to them about it. They're both open to having a relationship with them. The youngest, she doesn't remember any of that stuff because she was 9. She was
Yeah.
so engulfed in her grief for her dad. She does not remember a lot.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know. And how old are your girls now? They were 17 and 9 then, but they're how old now?
they're 23 and 31.
Okay, okay. So yeah, so
Oh
they're
my
adults.
God.
They're adults. They can make that
Yes.
sounds like
And
I
they
know.
are fantastic.
Yeah, they are beautiful girls too. Yeah, I know. For me, I had something similar with my husband's family where they blamed me for his death, and actually did some really horrible, awful things during the days and weeks after his death that I just I can't believe how cruel people can be, but I do know that people can be cruel and say horrible things.
Yes.
That yeah. So anyway, that's that. But I also want to talk a bit about now. I know because you're a healthcare professional that you, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, know the value of self-care as well as taking care of your girls. So did you take that time? I mean, were you thinking about that in the aftermath, right? For
Oh,
a couple of years where I need to be there for myself in order to be there for my girls and so
yeah. So I was already in counseling because Terry and I had such a the last couple of years, our relationship was really rocky. And we had gone to marriage counseling a few years before, probably about 6 years prior to him doing anything. We had gone to marriage counseling and he was so angry. And I mean, he blamed me for stuff that happened before I ever met him. And I'm like, I don't know what I can do. So I finally got to the point where we went to marriage counseling we went to 3 different counselors before we found one that I felt that actually could understand us. And he let me pick, and then he would say, well, I let you pick, so you can't say that this person's not going to work. And he was just being a jerk all the time to me. And I couldn't understand why. What did I do that you have to be like this for? I was contemplating divorce at one point, and I had paperwork for it, but he wouldn't sign it. And I just, and he would be telling me that he was going to take the kids and I'd never see them again. Well, I paid for everything for the girls. I was their person who volunteered at things and took them places and did the tournaments and everything that, that you do as a parent when your kids are in sports and clubs and stuff like that, even at that age. And he wouldn't even come to their games or anything unless he absolutely had to. And like I said, I paid for everything that they did, and he paid the household bills. And I was scared to death that he might be that father that they agree with that could have the kids and stuff. So I was afraid to leave. And knowing me and being the firstborn and being very confident and strong-willed, I look back at myself and go, what the hell were you thinking, you idiot? But hindsight is 2020, right? You're trying to save your marriage, and you don't want your kids to be in this situation. But the other thing is they never saw us fight. We never argued in front of the girls or anything. So as far as they were concerned, they knew there was tension, but they didn't know what it was or anything like that.
yeah.
So I finally stopped going to marriage counseling with him because I said, the last meeting I went to, the counselor was like, I can see you're making progress and it feels like you two are communicating better. And I said, I really think we are too. And then he comes out with this about, well, she lies about everything and this, that, and the other. So I wouldn't believe anything she says anyway. And I looked at him and I was like, what? And I walked out of the office and I said, I am not going back to marriage counseling with you because no matter what I do to help myself, it will never be enough for you. I don't know what you want. I have no idea what I can do. And I'm not going to change my whole person just to satisfy you. If that's what you want, then maybe you need to be with somebody else or whatever. And she really wanted to talk to him by himself. He went one time and they talked about his dad who was an alcoholic and had a major stroke when he was a kid, and died when he was 18. He didn't go back for the funeral. He hated his father. His mom and dad came from Ireland, and they got married late and had kids late, and he was the oldest of 6 kids. The dad used to beat the mom and caused her 2 miscarriages in their lifetime. They lived in the Bronx in New York, and were in a 2-bedroom apartment as the apartment managers. And here he is with a stroke in the bed all day long. And he'd send Terry to the store to get him cigarettes and beer every day.
Yeah.
And Terry absolutely hated him because he had 6 kids, but children should be seen and not heard in a 2-bedroom apartment. And So it was just really rough. So he had a lot of angst against his dad. So he wrote a letter to his dad with the counselor the one time, and then he never went back. I went and found myself a counselor that I could go to for me to work through things. And I actually just stopped counseling with the person that I was seeing the last time because my counselor retired and I went with the new one. I just stopped seeing her 2 years ago because we both felt it was time for me to move on. I'd worked through everything I needed to. And at that point, I no longer had survivor guilt or anything like that. So, and which is good, and
Yeah.
everything. But as far as the girls, so he died on a Sunday, and by Monday morning, I had them both in with a counselor who was a very good child counselor in Snohomish County. And Erin had been seeing her already, my oldest, because when she was 16, she had her heart broken by a boy. It was horrific to see. And so she started counseling and went on an anxiety med, which when Terry found out she was on an anxiety med, he flipped his lid and said, I don't give permission for her to have it. I don't want her taking it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm the one taking her to it. My insurance is paying for it. My daughter needs it. I'm not going to let her end up like the rest of your family and not being able to deal with any mental health issues. So she's taking it. And she did. And she's still taking it to this day because she has really bad anxiety, like the rest of his family. That's the biggest thing for most of them is the anxiety. But his youngest brother, like I mentioned earlier, was diagnosed as schizophrenic and has had several episodes in the last 14 years. And his sister, who passed away I think she's been gone 12 years. She was also, when she was 14, she started hearing voices, and her whole life could not keep a job or a relationship or anything. So
sad.
he has a brother in Oregon who is the same way, that is not allowed to contact myself or the girls. He's threatened to kill us. He's threatened to kill my sister-in-law.
Wow.
We don't know where he's at in Oregon, just that he stays away from us. That's all I care about. So his family is.
Tell me how are your girls doing today? I know one just got married because I saw that on social media.
Oh my gosh, yes, that was we finally got another boy to the family. He is fantastic. He'll do puzzles with us. I'm a huge puzzler, which because we've shared puzzles before. I always have a puzzle going. The girls and I like to do that. He is fantastic for her. They are a match. They're a perfect match. And they both know they don't want kids, which I never knew that my oldest did not want kids. She made a comment to me probably about 2 years ago now that she always thought when you grew up, you got married and you had kids, that's just what you did. And I'm like, yeah, that's typical of most people. She goes, but I don't want kids. She goes, I can barely take care of myself. How am I supposed to take care of a kid? I'm like, that's a really good reason. And her husband, it feels the same way. So I get asked quite a bit, when are you going to have grandkids now that they're married? And I'm like, I'm not, but I have a grand dog and a grand cat that I get to watch every once in a while. So that's awesome.
Yep.
And they're happy. She's doing fantastic.
Yeah, it's very mature of them to realize that they don't want kids, especially at the age of 31. I mean, that's still pretty young. But
they dated for 5 years before they got married. And the catalyst was my 27-year-old cousin getting killed on Thanksgiving. It'll be 3 years this Thanksgiving that she was killed. And for some reason, she and Erin were extremely close. She was like another one of my kids. We were always close. And she and Erin were extremely close. And for some reason, when that happened, when she passed, something clicked in Erin's head that said, I didn't want to get married, but I really don't know why I didn't want to get married. And I think we should get married. And he had asked her. I mean, there was a whole production of it that I missed because they were camping and they had all their friends and my youngest daughter with them and stuff. And so I got video of it after the fact because I won't go camping. But it was pretty cool. But yeah, so they did end up getting married. It's a year now they've been married. They just had their 1-year anniversary. And I walked her down the aisle, and my youngest officiated the wedding, which was cool. So it was really nice. And then my youngest graduated from Western 2 years ago with her degree and is working in the field that she studied for. and she has a serious boyfriend, and they live up in the Bellingham area. And he's really good, but the one thing I worry about is she says he reminds her of her dad.
It
So,
doesn't necessarily have to be bad. I mean, he wasn't, there was good
no,
parts of him, maybe there's something else there. And as you mentioned, they were very close. Right?
exactly.
So, it could be that it's the good parts that remind her of dad. So yeah.
Yeah, and it is. I think it's he's very quiet, which is like her dad. Her dad was never really loud, but the thing about him was he had a fantastic personality, and he was a big flirt, and he liked to joke around and stuff like that. And her boyfriend, in some of the mannerisms and stuff, I can see Terry, but it's not like a gross thing. So I sometimes worry, but it's okay. I know she's got a good head on her shoulder. She's extremely smart. And I think the biggest thing that she's dealt with that my oldest did not deal with is that she felt abandoned by her dad when he did that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I,
at that age,
and
yeah. At that age,
what makes me upset is that she didn't tell me that until 3 years ago, that she felt abandoned by her dad. So she went to the initial counselor for a long time. For the first few, like 4 years, I think we went to her for grief counseling. And then we found another counselor that was closer to us for her, that is based in Everett, and she's been seeing him. Well, she doesn't see him now, but she was seeing him. And through high school and college, she would text him and say, "Hey, I need an appointment," when she knew she was having some issues. And so it just was, not very often, but often enough where she had presence of mind to know that she needed to speak to him instead of to me or to her sister.
yeah. And
So,
that,
I
Francie,
mean,
has
I
an
think I've
awful
done a really good job with them about what counseling is for,
yeah.
and why
Yep.
you should do
I was
it.
just going to give you those kudos. I was just going to give you those kudos, as you've obviously, these girls know that there's no weakness at all to reach out when you need help, and it's
Exactly.
okay, and that you should, and to that self-recognition of recognizing when I need to reach out to help, especially for young people. I mean,
Yes.
I don't think I knew how to do that till I was in my 40s, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of really, so you've done an amazing job with those girls, and I'm very, very proud of you. I think you've done a wonderful job. So I want to know, before we end though, if someone's listening to this and maybe they're, kind of in the same kind of situation, newly lost someone to suicide and all that comes with it, from what you've learned and what you've gone through, what would your recommendation be, to do this or to don't do this, or anything along those lines that you can think of that you would say, do this or whatever?
Okay, this might be kind of long, because first of all, get into counseling. I don't care who you are, or what your status is, you need to get into counseling to work on yourself, to make sure that you don't take the blame for what they did. Since Terry has died, I have several friends who have had nephews or brothers or what significant others die. And I'm a huge reader. I'm a book nerd. I love to read. I have several books on suicide. I do have a favorite one that I lend out to everybody and suggest that they buy it and go through it. And I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but if anybody wants it, I can give it to you so they can get it. But it's really a good book, and it helped me immensely.
Is it
Um,
about a woman who lost her husband to suicide?
I can't remember if that's the one it is or
Okay.
not. I have 2 copies of it in my bookshelf. I'll have to grab it and let you know.
Yeah, my favorite to recommend is the book called No Time to Say Goodbye, and it's
That's
by
it. That's
yeah,
it. No time to say goodbye. Yes, that's it.
Carla
I
Fine.
love that book.
You know what I like about that book, and Carla Fine is the author, and that book's
Yes.
around for a while now, is, she goes into all of that, didn't why, the self get, why didn't I see this coming, or whatever. And I think I've actually given that book to people before in that same situation, and
Mhm.
really you get you grounded in the foot. Not only are you not alone, there's been people in your shoes, but that all that self-doubt and that blame and all that crap that comes into play in your head is unfortunately
Normal.
normal when it comes to suicide, because of that extra stigma that's there. And then how to get, to a space where you can, forgive if you will, the person
Mhm.
who's gone. And I don't have to forgive somebody who dies of cancer, but if they take their own life, it's like, okay, that's what the whole stigma and the difference of it is, that just really comes into play. So yeah, as soon as you started talking about the book, I thought, I bet you she's talking about Carla Fine's
Yes,
book.
I love that book, and I give it to people too, because I think out of all of the books that are out there, and there is a lot,
Yeah,
that is the best one.
yeah,
And yeah, so the one thing though was that I think it was about 48 hours after everything happened, of course, everyone at work knew what had happened, or they had an idea. So I didn't go to work for about a week, but one of the nursing instructors came to my house that that I dealt with when I was at work. And I was not a huge fan of our nursing faculty at that time, because most of them didn't think medical assistants were any good. So their whole attitude really shaded me towards nurses. But I've learned since then that not all nurses are like that. And there's lots and lots of good people out there that are nurses that don't think that medical assistants are trying to take their jobs and all that BS. But anyway, she came and talked to me. She had been dealing with the death of her parents. And so she walked through and helped me make a list of things that I needed to do: accounts, the death certificate, where to have the body sent after the coroner was done, and just things that I had not thought of, because I had never been through anything like this before and had no idea what to do or where to go or anything. So that helped me a lot. And then talking to my grandmother was like, at that point, make sure you get at least 10 copies of the death certificate, because everywhere you go, they're going to want the official copy. I actually only ended up needing like 3 copies. I have a copy that I've kept in my records, and then I think everyone that I went to would make a copy of the death certificate, so I never ever had to actually send an official one in, except for the house.
yeah,
And so I didn't need 10 copies, but I ended up with 10 because that's what my grandma said to get. Um, and then the other thing was making sure that I was taking care of myself. I cried in front of the girls. I wasn't ashamed to do that, because even though I tried not to, sometimes I couldn't help it. And there was days that I just needed to cry by myself. When everybody showed up at my house that day that he died, I felt suffocated. And I am usually not claustrophobic, but I just wanted everybody to leave the house so I could process what I just learned.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but definitely counseling, make a list of what needs to be done, or talk to someone who's been through, it's not about the suicide, it's about someone who's been through a death
yes,
and what you need to do. And then the one thing that I do regret about the whole entire thing is that when I asked, because he wanted to be cremated, he told me he wanted to be cremated. And we both grew up Catholic. So, of course, that didn't go over well with the relatives in Ireland at all. Um, but I did it because that's what he asked me to do. And I took my sister-in-law, she was still here, with me. So, because I had asked if I could see him one last time. That's my biggest regret, was taking her, because I didn't get to say goodbye by myself.
oh,
But the thing is, he looked so peaceful.
oh,
He wasn't in pain anymore.
yeah, yeah,
And,
that's,
I just think of him, I try not to think of him the last time I saw him like that, but he had a smirk on his face and I wanted to slap him, which is sad but happy at the same time. And I was like, I couldn't cry in front of her while I was there.
yeah,
It would not come out. I felt like I had to be the strong person.
yeah,
And that's the only thing I ever regretted out of everything that's been done.
yeah, yeah. Again, we talked about a little bit about that sister-in-law, and it sounds like she was relying on you to
Yeah,
be her support system, which,
definitely.
not to her, whatever. I'm just saying that was, and you being the person you are, wouldn't, you would want to help her and so on and so forth. And that unfortunately had you miss out on something that was,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Other thing before I go, for people like with the situation where Terry and my oldest were not getting along for so long, and they did talk before he passed, and I guess he felt like he had closure and she felt good about it too, is that at the point where he passed, because he was so obvious about the youngest being his favorite now, that it was really, really hard on the older one, and they absolutely could not stand each other. And to this day, those two are like this.
Mm-hmm.
They
They're
do
very
everything
close.
together. They're really close. They're best friends.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. But, and this probably sounds terrible to people, but if Terry had lived, they would probably still hate each other now because of the way he was with the two of them.
Yeah. It's almost,
And
yeah, it's almost as if he brought that sort of healing together for them
yeah,
in that way. And
so,
you know,
and
this makes me think of is that there are, you know, good things that come out of
exactly,
events, and it's
exactly.
hard. I think some people don't understand that. They think, well, what are you trying to do? It's like, I'm not trying to find that silver lining. I'm just saying that there are some things that, you know, and in speaking for myself, I can think of that, you know, are better in my life, with what happened with my husband. And
Exactly.
uh,
I agree.
it doesn't mean I'm
Well,
glad it happened, doesn't mean I wish it happened. It doesn't, nothing. It's just saying I can
right,
recognize
right.
that there were some things that came out of it that actually weren't bad. And there's no shame in that, and so on. So
And
yeah.
the one thing I appreciate that you also understand, and it's the stigma of suicide, people look at you differently
Yeah.
because it was suicide. And one of the big statistics out there is that, oh, if your parent or somebody in your family commits suicide, then you're, 75% more likely to do that. My kids and I would never do that to myself because I'm too chicken to hurt myself. And taking pills, or I would not do that to my kids. Both of the girls, no, we're kind of weird where we do joke about suicide. Like, it got to the point where if anything happened, one of them would go, well, I'm going to kill myself. And we would laugh. And it was so morbid, but it's just the way we got through it. That's one of the ways, because I can be really snarky, and both of my girls are the same way. So we're sarcastic and stuff. And for the three of us, we have this bond that is just nobody could ever break because of it.
Yeah.
And the world keeps moving. No matter what happens to you, the world keeps moving, and people aren't going to be checking on you forever. And that's okay. It's okay for them to not know what to say to you. I mean, since my cousin died, I even going through this because of her death, I don't know how to talk to my aunt. I
Yeah.
don't know what to say to her when I see her. And my sister's like, just ask her how she's doing. And, what would you have wanted people to ask you? And I'm like, well, I really just wanted to leave me alone, is what I wanted. So I have a hard time talking to my aunt about the death of her daughter. And I hate that about myself because I feel like I should be able, of all people, to talk to her about it. But I don't want to bring her more pain talking about it, but I also know that it's okay to say their name and to talk about them, because that's what we do with Terry. So we do the same with my cousin.
Yep.
We talk about her and bring her name up. And
Yeah, it's important to remember they don't stop existing, right?
exactly.
They're still, the pieces of them are still here. I mean, your children, I mean, you
Well,
know,
look at you. You've got your two kids, and I've got mine. And, no matter what, that is a huge mark on your soul, I think, that you have to deal with for the rest of your life,
yes,
no matter what you do moving
yeah,
forward. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Francie, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I'm not only do I absolutely adore you because I've known you for so long, but I really appreciate
Thank
you sharing
you.
your story. I know, and I know you and I share a lot in common, with our stories and so on. But it is nice to chat with you, and I am so glad you were able to share your story and about your girls and so on. So, thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.